Welcome back, everybody. We have got an awesome story today because Valve are actually doing something that Razer kind of did in 2013, and that Nintendo, of course, did with the Nintendo Switch. Because we are getting the Steam Deck. Not to be confused with the Stream Deck, because that's how I initially read it. Yes, look, this is basically awesome. So, here's what you need to know. Valve have been rumored to be working on a handheld console for quite some time now. We have finally found out what it is. It runs, basically it runs like SteamOS, which is a Linux fork. So there's that. And in terms of the overall bit of hardware, imagine a Switch, but it's more chunky. That essentially is what you're dealing with here. So your user experience, like turning it on, playing some games in Steam, that should all work very, very smoothly and seamlessly. But of course, it still is a device with a lot of customization, so it's pretty much free and open. You can do whatever you want. It's running a Linux distro. So that essentially is the main story here. If you want to do PC gaming on the go, this is essentially going to be your best option. Now, what's interesting to me is this. I remember Total Biscuit used to like playing his Razer Edge when he was on international flights. Razer actually were pretty early on this sort of idea. This was around 2013, I think. So it's pretty neat that we're actually seeing this idea be continued. And of course, in terms of context, what did we all want? A Nintendo Switch Pro. What did we get? A Nintendo Switch OLED, which did not have an internal spec bump or anything like that. Now, in terms of the other things to understand, this is quite Switch-like, as you can see, in that it is designed to work both handheld and in a dock. Now, also, if you're interested in the hardware specs of this, we have to take this with, not a grain of salt, but we got to take it in context, because this obviously is not a super powerful device. I mean, it can't be, just look at it. But we got to think about the types of games you'll realistically be running on a device like this, and also the resolution you'll be running those games at. And also there's some architectural things to think about as well. So this is running a 4-core AMD Zen 2 CPU between 2.4 and 3.5 gigahertz, RDNA 2 GPU. So basically, right, it's an AMD APU. That's what they're using for this. 16 gigs of RAM. Now, here's the thing. 1.6 teraflops. See all this business of teraflops? I mean, it's a handy little benchmark that I think it's easy to talk about who's got the most teraflops. I would just say that doesn't really translate ideally to game performance, so don't put too much stock in people, quoting teraflop numbers. Now, you might be thinking, that's really not that powerful. And sure, if you were on your big 1080p display or your 1440p display and you had this hardware, you'd have a big hard time running games. However, its performance target, 720p, 60 FPS, right? So if that's its performance target when you are playing, I assume a little bit more AAA-ish feeling games, I mean, certainly based off the sorts of games Valve are showing off in their demo, I think that is quite reasonable for what this is doing. But then, if you're playing a game like Hades, or, Binding of Isaac, or, anything, right? A lot of indie games. Obviously, these performance issues I think won't really matter too much. So overall, we've got a decently capable bit of hardware. Lets you do PC gaming on the go. And for what a lot of people wanted from the Nintendo Switch, I think this is going to do a great job. Doubly so because you'll be able to put emulators on this. You'll have all of that freedom. What comes to my mind is the people who loved the PS Vita and the PSP for emulators and stuff because they could just crack it and do whatever they wanted. A lot of that stuff's going to happen in this device as well. And I guess the final thing then is storage. So the base model is $400, $399, 64 gigs internal. However, it is expandable with an SD card. Right, so there's that. However, if you go to the 256 or 512, well, the 256 is NVMe. The 512 model is, it says high-speed NVMe. So, should be good in your load times. And those two models are 529 and 649, respectively. So, Switch Pro. I'm excited. What do you think?
I'm generally not super sold on the concept, but the thing that really impresses me more than anything else is that price. That price point is so unbelievably aggressive that, you're looking at, do I get a Switch OLED or do I get a gaming PC in a similar form factor that's significantly more flexible and can play so many more games, and is also just a PC that I can dock to use as a PC. It's unless you're in for Nintendo first parties or are super sold on the Nintendo platform, which isn't even like in terms of playing games on it that aren't exclusive, there's no reason you would want a Switch over this. Realistically, like this is genuinely insane for Valve to come in and do it themselves.
Yeah.
It's brutal, and I think that it probably won't have the same like kind of overall like impact on the market that a Switch would, or like the Switch has, but it's still like it completely destroys the Switch for any more hardcore gamers, and it's now just like the sheer wealth of indie games you have access to on this.
Yeah, like even from this IGN article, saying I was able to play Jedi Fallen Order on an in-development Steam Deck at high graphical settings with little to no issue. Now, I would really like to see better, performance numbers and things like that. I'm dying to see what happens when Digital Foundry get their hands on this, because that will really tell us so much. But for me, it's like there are so many games that, are not super performance intensive anyway, that are just on PC. If I'm thinking about when the world is opening up, say going in flights, doing that again. I mean, in the same way that TB was using his Razer Blade, this is just perfect for that type of use case. And then what's really interesting to me, right? Because this is a computer. So are you saying that I could dock that, connect Bluetooth keyboard and mouse, and just get some work done? I mean, sure, I'd usually just use my iPad for that, but this is a great level of flexibility. And, I mean, to really do a dunk at Nintendo, Bluetooth audio? The new Switch doesn't have Bluetooth audio, dude. What?
Yeah, of course it doesn't. They've just reused the same stuff. They just reused the same, like, internals, largely. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Bluetooth audio, even though it's, 2021.
And that's just completely wild. Because, like, a handheld device. I mean, man, using a handheld with now that I'm in like full team wireless, you can move your arms about. I mean, not that I'm playing a Switch, just going wee, but still, it's nice to not have wires, and they're doing that here. So it's interesting. Like as I look at it, I will admit to you that let's actually just take a look at the device, like talk through the form factor here. So it feels a bit chunky. Now, usually I'm okay with like an Xbox controller or something, like the more chunky one, so I'm perfectly happy with that. Then there's the trackpads. Now, the trackpads are really interesting to me because, I'm pretty used to trackpads at this stage just because of like using an iPad Pro with its case, using mobile devices for work. I mean, I'd never game in a trackpad, but I do remember using the Steam controller. And whenever I was using the Steam controller, one of the things I did was set up a World of Warcraft custom UI with a whole bunch of stuff so that basically, you could play WoW, also use the Steam controller. And using those little touchpads that Steam controller had to just do the basics, like you'd never play a twitchy game with that. No way at all. But it really did allow for a lot of flexibility. So I think that stuff is, great. Now, I said, thumbsticks look a bit high to me. But I'm going to assume that will work out just fine because, if it was a busted design, why would they do it? So, need to wait and get hands-on, but I'm interested. Actually, it's that thing for me. The Switch, it's it's a lot of, I think you as well, but like a lot of my friends, mostly guys because, bigger hands or whatever. I try to use a Joy-Con and it'll give me cramps. It'll like give me a sore hand. I'd need to use a Pro controller with a Switch in order to have a comfortable experience. Now, it's not like that for a lot of other people that I know who, they pick up an Xbox controller and it's actually just too big for their hands. But at least targeted at me, this seems like a perfect device.
Yeah, I generally just, like after playing with the Index for a bit, I just trust Valve largely on these design decisions now. Because if they have the same amount of thought and care put into UX as the overall user experience of the Index, if they put that into this, then I'm 100% there for it. Like, it looks kind of funky. Like, it does look to me like a knockoff Switch.
Yeah.
It looks like a bad knockoff Switch, but I kind of trust them. It's just, I guess it's a matter of, there'll be an optimal way to control it. They'll have, like, the correct kind of, or, like, what size of hands people should have to play with it, and they'll work based on that. But I think it's really Like, I basically just trust them. And this is the other thing that's actually, I think, important, is obviously you talked about it being customizable because it is a PC. You'll probably just be able to, I mean, even if not officially, via just people busting it open, you'll be able to install whatever you want on it, for sure.
Yeah.
Like, just, you don't like SteamOS, have any other distro of Linux, have any other distro, have any Windows you want on it, because it is just an AMD, like, CPU or APU rather. But the thing that gets me is, like, if they have expandable storage in any capacity, literally just if there's a spare M.2 there somewhere, or if you can replace whatever's there if it's not soldered to the board, then like all of the pricing problems of the higher end completely goes away.
Yeah.
And you've got this incredible thing. But it's Valve. They just go, well, people are going to buy on Steam, so we can undercut the shit out of the entire market price-wise because we'll make it back. Kind of similar to how the console manufacturers that already exist do, where they're like, yeah, we'll make a loss on this, whatever. It doesn't matter because we've got platform stuff. But now Steam or Valve are actually leveraging that. They're like, oh yeah, why don't we do that?
Yeah, like Gabe himself did say that the price points were painful but critical.
Yeah.
Which yeah. So I think this is awesome. Now there's one other thing I should mention. So the more premium version does have an anti-glare glass etching. Now I don't know if that's like the nano etching that they have it's like the Apple Pro Display XDR, and it's a display like process that they offer, and I think the iMacs as well. But I've heard that those things are like pretty awesome for anti-glare. So that is one reason to buy the more expensive version. And certainly using glary screens, when you're a kid in the back of the car, it's a sunny day, you're going on holidays, it's not a fun time. So I'd definitely be getting the etched glass. Like, even just that would probably make it reasonable for me. I think this thing's basically awesome. There's definitely been some skepticism just because it's a Valve hardware project, and people think, well, was it the Steam Link and the Steam controller? They were fire sailing Steam machines. They tried, didn't work out that well. A lot of people would say, well, why is it going to work this time? I'd perhaps say back that it's probably not going to work as well as the Switch, because I just think that a lot of the Switch market is not PC gamers. And it's Nintendo. It's so well moated around their IPs. So I think this is more for like a flexi PC gamer or something along those lines. So it's that sort of thing. I think this is an awesome device. I'm also not entirely sure it'll do incredibly well, but I think it would do quite well, and I'd be surprised if it was a big failure. And like, as much as we can criticize Valve's past hardware projects, I mean, the index is unbelievably good.
Yeah, so that's what I think is interesting, because the angle I'm looking at this is like, what market are they aiming for? Because the Index was an entirely new high-end market for high-end VR gaming, and they nailed that. They knocked it out of the park because of everything they had actually, set up to do that. They gave it their all, and it succeeded. Steam machines were they were trying to target the PC gaming market with PCs.
Yeah.
But they were PCs that weren't, like running Linux, weren't running Windows like the majority of like PCs on like that thing does on Steam does. But they were just too early with that, I think, because Linux gaming now with Proton is so good that was like, they went in way too early with all of that. But also they were trying to replace PCs in a pre-built way, versus how many gamers on Steam use their own built PCs, their own customizable stuff. They kind of went for that market and failed. With the controller, they tried to really, really innovate on a super solid set-in-stone design. That was also a little bit too expensive versus the people picking up Xbox 360 controllers for like $19, $20, whatever it is now for them. And then the Link was kind of, relies on wireless stuff in your own house. Didn't work so well. They've replaced that largely with just an app that does it fine. But this is a unique slice of the market, because people who are PC gamers who want to play games on the go, their options are a ergonomic nightmare of a laptop that's extremely expensive to play anything half decently, or a Switch, but then they don't get to bring their library over. But now, by that, you can play all of your indie games that you have on Steam, which they just throw at you for, a couple of dollars at a time.
Yeah.
The entire library you've been building up since 2011, 2009, 2008, whenever you started getting into PC gaming.
Can't do that on Switch.
Yeah. It should be a complete victory for those people who want to play games on the go and are PC gamers.
Plus, right? Say you play CS, you play LoL, you play Dota. I mean, all those esports focused games, they are super performant. You could just dock this, keyboard and mouse, done. I just think this is an incredible device. And another thing is, Steam machines were done at a time where, look, performance equaled heat. And the Steam machines, the idea was a small box. You compare a gaming laptop of today versus a gaming laptop of when the Steam machines were first announced, and it is night and day. So I actually wonder if they were to do a Steam machine now that was way more, was just leveraging the fact that our stuff runs better, consumes less power, outputs less heat. I wonder how it would go, because maybe they'd be able to tackle better price performance. But also with Steam machines, I mean, they were so fragmentary. Because Steam machines, it was like, it almost reminded me of Intel and the Ultrabook. So Ultrabook is actually an Intel term, and Intel produced basically sample Ultrabooks to sort of say, hey there, manufacturers, this is an Ultrabook. This is like a thing that we do. And I think that's basically what Valve did with the Steam machines. But then Alienware did a Steam machine, all of that stuff. I would wonder what would happen if you just had little Valve gaming box that was an excellent value. Now that said, could Valve compete with a Series S in terms of price performance? Almost certainly not. Microsoft can take way more of a hit in profitability.
Yeah, but that actually is a perfect way to lean into what I was going to talk about next, which is a Series S can play Xbox games and can play your Steam games. Sorry, can't play your Steam games. A Steam machine or a Steam Deck can play your Xbox games because Xbox is on PC.
True. And here's what I... Trust me to always bring this back to friggin' Apple. Look, everyone. There's a lot of reasons to be critical about Apple, but the one thing they've got right is the Apple Silicon. It basically feels like there is demon energy put into their M1 chips. The amount of performance that they get for the amount of heat and heat produced and battery drain it's like leagues beyond Intel stuff, leagues beyond even AMD stuff, right? And that's because they're using it's ARM, right? It's RISC, it's different from x86, all that jazz. But there is just that little bit of me that wonders, what if there was a timeline where that level of performance could be accessible to something, a device like this, like imagine if you could pack the power of an M1 or something similar into this form factor. I mean, you would have, I think about even playing, not even the M1 iPad, on the iPad that I had before that, the A12Z or whatever, and it running Genshin Impact, max settings, 100 FPS, because the iPad has a 100 FPS screen. And I was just sitting there with a gamepad connected to it, with my mind blown that this friggin' iPad was actually giving me a full console experience at 100 frames. So I'm very excited for the Steam Deck. I am very, very, very excited for what a Steam Deck 2 could look like when a few more years of, just hardware cycles have happened. And because obviously there will be a little bit of a performance sting that you'll feel with this device. But we're soon going to be at a point where that won't be a thing. That's really exciting.
Yeah, we're definitely getting into extremely exciting times for hardware. And it's like, I was already super excited by the AMD stuff, by Zen 2. And I'm in love with the Ryzen 7 I have. It absolutely is it is not had any problem with anything I've thrown at it, like CPU wise. But then the M1 Mac is just completely, obviously the performance is very different between the two, but it's just the fact that I've got this little thing that I carry around now. It does everything almost perfectly. It's completely insane, and I think that we're only seeing we would be seeing more of it if not for the silicon shortage, which is really annoying.
Yeah.
But the idea of once the silicon shortage is kind of cleared up, once supply lines are back to full speed, once the market's been tested on a Steam Deck, we're gonna have some unbelievable stuff in the next couple of years, especially with even how engine development's coming along.
Yeah. What I want to see, because Unity itself supports M1 now. I want to see what happens when the M2 stuff comes out for a 16-inch MacBook Pro, and there's one that's, because GPU is the one area where it doesn't do as well. I want to see what it's like, when somebody can get a 16-inch MacBook Pro next year, like the 2022 model, that'll have an M1X or an M2 chip, and then compare that to the latest Razer Blade with, a GTX 3060, 3070, 3080, I want to see where that M2 is. How that actually lines up in terms of, the power, the battery, all of heat, all of that shit. Because it's just that thing. Tracking forward, I think we are about to enter an incredible period of time for just the power. I mean, we're already in an incredible period, but it's going to be even more incredible. And I think that's just the type of device that is going to be the big winner from that. It's totally mobile. And if there was something to finish on, it would probably just be me saying, you know what, Razer? Good on yous for actually thinking about this shit so early. And you know what? Razer have come on so far at making hardware. The Razer, like one of the guys who works with us, Rory, he's got a Razer Blade. And it's incredible. It does remind you of that, that kind of, MacBook build quality. It's such a well-built device. I would just love to see Razer, to revisit this, to do it again with all of that they've learned. Because, you know what? There is nobody more credible in this space than Razer, because they came up with this idea, and the likes of the Switchblade in 2011. Big thinkers, thinking forward. I wonder if they're a bit salty that so much of the rest of the industry's been able to capitalize on that now. Razer were just held back, I think, by what a CPU and GPU could do at the time.
Yeah, they were far too ahead of their time, but now hardware's there. Hopefully they get another swing at it, because almost certainly they'll be looking at the Steam Deck and going, all right, because obviously they've got their similar things for the phone snap-on stuff. They're probably going to have something out within the next 2 years. It's a competitor. Yeah,
like their experience in just hardware manufacturing, but also making controllers, making fight sticks, all that shit they do. I mean, could be big. So I think that's it for this story.
Yep, absolutely is.
Good news. Good news. Actually, good goddamn news in gaming. This is the shit that I live for. So thanks for listening. Thanks to Valve and all of these companies who are actually doing some cool shit. We will see you in the next one.